members, we have formed the quorum. It is the appointed time. So let's get started with the joint meeting on the panel on housing and panel on development. Why I'm sitting here? Because the Mr. Tommy Zhang of panel on development hoped that I can chair the meeting. Are you in agreement? Any objection? No objection? If members are in agreement, then I will chair the meeting as the chairman of the joint meeting. The first item is the public housing development plan at Wang Chau, Yuen Long. The two panels both hope to discuss this item, so that's why we are having a joint meeting today. So now let's invite the administration team in. Have you read through the papers? Well, if that is the case, then I will ask the government officials to give a brief presentation so that we can allow more time for members to ask questions. The list of government officials attending is tabled in front of you, so I'm not going to introduce them one by one. Secretary, the members have read through the papers. Please, if needed, make a very brief introduction, and then we can go directly into the discussion. So I will say a few words, Madam Chair. Yes, Professor Zhang. Madam Chair, the current term of government's major policy agenda is to increase housing supply. In the long-term housing strategy promulgated in 2014, we have a demand-led strategy to deal with the imbalance in supply and shortage, and PRH is to address the housing needs of the grassroots and to improve living environment. Public have higher expectations on supply of PRH. Since the assumption of the current term of government, the PRH housing has increased by 44% in volume, and by September, the waiting time has reached 4.5 years. And we have encountered different difficulties in providing PRH, and we have to adopt a give and take approach. And the ultimate consideration is that under the practical circumstances, how we can provide the maximum number of PRH units in the shortest time. For the Wang Chau housing development project, this is one of the items that we have to adopt this give and take approach. And in the process, the public can, through the TBB district council papers, know about the progress of our work. And from this such public information, the public will come to know a few points. First, in 2013, the government studied the technical feasibility of developing phases 1, 2, 3, and altogether 17,000 units are planned. From the initial report of the planning and engineering study, starting from mid-2013, the various government departments have come into grasp with various data. And by the end of 2013, after the government departments have discussed, they believe that phases 2 and 3 involve difficulties, including vast tracts of brownfield size, and we must deal with that with a brownfield policy first. And in early 2014, the government adjusted its policy, and we decided to take forward phase 1 first to build 4,000 units. The advantage of this is that we can provide public housing, 4,000 public housing units, which can be incorporated in the 10-year housing supply target. Later on, the government departments conduct public consultation rezoning in accordance with the established procedures, and then the TBB and district councils were questioned as to why we are not taking forward the remaining parts of the Wang Chau project. We said that we haven't given up on phases 2 and 3. We are postponing that development because phases 2 and 3 need environmental mitigation measures and infrastructural project, and we have to come up with a brownfield site policy first. And on the paper submitted on the 18th of October, paragraph sets out this. The various issues were raised with the Wang Chau development project, and we have responded accordingly. And in paragraphs 10 to 12, we have set out our explanations up to 18th of October, and we have issued various press releases in response to media inquiries which have been passed on to members. In response to public concerns, we have also, on the 18th of October, we have made public the reports of the planning and engineering study for public access. And in relation to privacy, land matters, and financial information, that has been covered up after taking into consideration legal advice. We hope that the public can have a better understanding of our work in Wang Chau. Some members of the public said that the government has not conducted public consultation, and we are using soft lobbying to replace public consultation. That's not a fact. I must emphasize that the government has conducted consultation in accordance with the established practice, and from 2014 and 2015, we conducted extensive public consultation, including consulting the Pingshan Rural Committee, Yuen Long District Council, and also at the TPB statutory rezoning process, we have also consulted the public. And at various stages of the consultation process, the public could participate, and they did present their views to us and made formal representations. I must reiterate that is an established practice to do soft lobbying on various projects, and the aim is to understand the concerns of the local representatives and also their initial views on proposed development. And such comments can help the government map out the final plan, and also in the public consultation we can better respond to district concerns. However, lobbying cannot and should not replace consultation, public consultation set out in statutory processes. In the press conference on the 21st of September, I said that looking forward, we hope that, we envisage that we have to overcome difficulties in taking forward phases 2 and 3, including the pollution problem of the industrial estate and how to deal with brownfield sites. In order to compress the planning process, the government has decided to studying the brownfield sites policy, take forward technical feasibility study for phases 2 and 3, and that will take 2 years. And we will take reference from the results and decide on how to take forward the phases 2 and 3 development. And I and my colleagues are happy to exchange views with members and listen to members' views and respond to members' concerns and questions. Mr. Ma, Professor Zhang talked about the considerations for developing public housing in Wang Chau. I'd like to make 2 points. And the government's major policy is to release brownfield sites for development. And in the past few years, in the policy address and the budgets, we have set out that we would deal with brownfield sites. Well, just like clearance of squatters, we have to deal properly with compensation and rehousing issues, and we have to tread carefully if we to remove brownfield sites and the development on the and the impact on the operations. And brownfield sites now are providing good supporting functions to port backup facilities, recycling, storage, and provide many job opportunities. So we have to track carefully how to provide space for these operations. Since the task force on brownfield issues were established in 2014, we have done a lot of work, including doing a survey on the distribution and usage of brownfield sites in Hong Shui-Kiu and Yuen Long South. We have started a consultancy study using Hong Shui-Kiu as a pilot and explore the use of multi-story buildings to accommodate brownfield operations. And we are conducting technical and financial assessment and also exploring the operation and management model. We hope that the study will be completed by mid-2018. Looking forward, we are also considering an appropriate and comprehensive policies to deal with brownfield sites. And starting next year, the Planning Department will conduct a survey on the distribution and the situation of the brownfield sites in Hong Kong. And we hope to gather information to formulate policies for brownfield sites and draw up appropriate planning and consolidation policies for various brownfield sites so that we can better make use of the brownfield sites. As for land resumption, the Lands Department is responsible for land matters, and it will work together with the relevant bureaus and departments to do land resumption. For Yuen Long, Wang Chau Phase 1, the sewerage and the draining works have been approved by the CE Council. So the CEDD on the 11th of November posted notices on site and also did gazetto saying that the government will, in accordance with the relevant laws, to resume land. And we are also preparing for the relevant gazetto. And at the appropriate time, we will issue a press statement. So that's my supplement. Secretary, can you make available a copy of your speech? Well, we have a copy of Professor Zhang's address, but not Mr. Ma's. Can we have a copy now so that members can take a look? Well, part of it is handwritten. Yes, that's okay. So members who would like to speak, please raise your hand. There are quite a number of members. I hope that everyone can get a chance to ask a question.
Okay. Let
me read out the names first. Chairperson Lan Chi Chang, Wan Xiu Kin, Tanya Chen, Nam Chak Ting, Wu Chi, Wai Yu, Xing Wei, Lau Yip Ke, Eddie Ju, Chiu Ka Chen, Edward Yu, Chen Chong Tai, Roy Kwong, Raymond Chang, Nathan Lord, Tammy Zhang, Ines Yu Yong, and Lau Kok Chen. 4 minutes each, including answers and questions. Michael Tan. I have a question for the Undersecretary for Development. Arab is using sensitive information. Is it an isolated incident? Is it a tip of the iceberg? Well, there are rumors in the industry saying that the industry is very small, and well, so the use of government information is very common, and they said that consultants are helping the government do consultancy, and it's so silly not to use such information. It's just that Arab is caught this time. It's unfortunate. And if we have to root out the problem, we must do something to the system to prevent or plug such loopholes. I have 2 suggestions that the government can consider. First, you have to quell the dissatisfaction of the society because the media carry reports on it every day. So first, the government can legislate, asking all consultancies to sign a contract with the government, setting out categorically that all information should be kept confidential, and once the contract is breached, there should be heavy penalties. And you said that there would be bar from bidding for 3 months. And the industry people said that, well, it's such a light punishment. I have searched through the website, and I don't find any upcoming projects in the next 3 months. So heavy penalty really means criminal sanction to me.
Because they should be responsible for disclosing confidential information, because the industry only have few players. Now, in terms of population, employment, and traffic data, the government should make public the consultants' report as soon as possible so that we have a high degree of transparency. so that we can avoid all conflicts of interest and transfer of benefits. We are a civilized society, and all problems can be addressed and should be addressed by making things public. Well, we need to go through a set of procedures for the former option, including the Legislative Council's involvement. For the latter approach, it's easier, but so you need to strike a balance, or you'll be caught between the caught in the middle. Because if you don't have any penalty, then you're really toothless. Secretary, about the two options I mentioned, which one do you think is more feasible? Because you need to act sooner or later. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Tian, for your question. Let me explain to members what is called DPEDM, that is the Territorial Population and Employment Data Matrix. Well, we call this a matrix because we adopt this matrix as a standard on the population and other features in the district, and then we'll make cost projections and also conduct impact assessment on the data provided. And it is served as a reference. It is for the department's work on various assessments. I only have 10 seconds left. I gave you two options. Yes, we'll actively consider the two options, especially as far as the conditions are concerned. We'll see how we can impose a greater restriction. Well, I think that we'll come back to the question on matrix later. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Thank you, Madam Chair. Wang Chau development is really a predicament. On the one hand, we have housing development. If you conduct any local consultation, well, basically, there will be support for housing development instead of the other option. But in the process of housing development, Yuen Long is a disaster. Because Wang Chau, Yuen Long South, Campton South, and Hung Shui Kiu, well, after development, it can accommodate 400,000 population. Well, of course, as far as the location is concerned, it is a suitable location. But it is a question of whether we have enough support facilities for local residents. The government always takes a piecemeal approach, especially on Hung Shui Kiu, Yuen Long South, Wang Chau. You have piecemeal consultation. So when you consulted the district council, if you took the piecemeal approach, you would not face as strong an opposition from district council. So in terms of the study on land for housing development, what are the standards and guidelines that you considered? Madam Chair, perhaps I'll take this question and Mr. Ma can supplement. On earmarking sites, we rely on the assessment conducted by the Development Bureau and also the area supporting facilities, district population projected for public housing development. And before we conduct any local consultation, we also conduct internal assessment within government departments. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang talked about the large-scale housing development. And when we conducted an informal local consultation, we understood the concern. That is why at the District Council we explained the other projects in the pipeline, so that the District Council could have a full picture for consideration. However, sometimes it might be premature to disclose too much details on future projects because they may still be undergoing internal assessments within the government. Now, as far as the government is concerned, we understand that if we have more housing developments, an increase in population in the district, there may be concerns on supporting facilities and other community facilities, and that happens not only in Wang Chau. In 2014, we consulted the Yuen Long District Council and reported to the District Council our rezoning proposals in the pipeline, so that district councillors were made aware of the government's plan for future developments in Yuen Long. And we have short, medium, long-term planning, because for large-scale projects, it may take more than 10 years to complete, and these are longer-term plans. For short to medium-term land use reviews, what we considered is whether there is sufficient infrastructural support for the sites concerned, especially when this is the concern of many members. All right, thank you. I need to uphold the speaking time limit because we have many members in the queue, waiting in the queue. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2012, in July, the Housing Department and the ITC commissioned a consultant to conduct a study on Wang Chau. And based on the information in the preliminary study, a year or so later, in 2013, the government departments then got hold of the information of the study. And in fact, I think the pace of development has been quite quick, because in 2014, the rezoning proposal was submitted to the Town Planning Board, which the application was approved in October 2014. Now we have criticisms that the government has given up on the original plan of providing 17,000 flats. Only 4,000 flats will be provided, because the original plan was given up after some soft lobbying. And basically, the development would be phased. And according to the media, in the middle of 2014, according to media reports, the media also used the term phased development for Wang Chau, and that is to say, the media also understood that a part of the site will be developed first. Well, I think the area is so big, some 30 hectares. Definitely, the development would have to be phased. It cannot be developed in one go. Can you tell us something about the consultancy report of the engineering study? Let me take the question first. In July 2012, the government commissioned a consultant to conduct the planning and engineering study, the P&E study, to consider the technical feasibility of the project, and if it's feasible, what facilities would have to be provided, what mitigation measures would have to be introduced. But in fact, the consultant's perspective was to consider only the technical feasibility, but when the strategy or government policy was introduced, the government had to consider a number of things, including the procedures required and the impact assessments to be conducted. We decided to go for phase 1 first, because comparing to a concurrent development approach, developing phase 1 first would be easier. If we decided to take the concurrent development approach, we might have more obstacles to overcome. And we wanted to speed up housing supply as soon as possible, so that we can include the 4,000 flats in this project in the 10-year housing supply. And in the report, it is suggested that some supporting facilities should be provided and how much time is needed, but that is in the best scenario. For example, to go through the town planning procedure may take 9 months, but in reality it may be more than that, and we believe that the time required may not be as short as the consultant suggests. So in short, in the middle of 2013 or so, the consultancy report or the preliminary report was released, and very soon the government decided to take a phased development approach. That is why in 2014 the application was submitted to the Town Planning Board. The government reached a consensus in the end of 2013 to take the phased development approach. Next, Mr. Andrew Wan, followed by Ms. Tanya Chan. Thank you, Madam Chair. According to the paper, I think the message being sent here is that since the public housing the waiting time for public housing is now 4.5 years, and there's been a surge in the demand for public housing, and that is why we need to speed up public housing development. I have this impression from reading the paper that it seems that there is a subtext. The government seems to send a message. For example, some data, another wording which is very vague. And in point number 6, it talks about the sensitivity of the land information, and is redacted because of the sensitivity data. I don't know whether you can tell us the nature of the so-called sensitivity of the land information. Second point, things are vague. I think that's the impression that you're giving to the public. And without getting full information, I think that you're trying to and make us endorse your proposal. Well, about soft lobbying, we understand that when we talk about soft lobbying, well, in fact, the Secretary just now used a different term, informal consultation. And that no record or minutes whatsoever had been kept. I don't know whether this is the usual practice of the government. Well, I understand that sometimes you'd like to talk to us about government policies informally, but at least some notes will have to be jotted down, because you need to report back to your superior. So is it really true that no records were ever kept? Is it a way of replacing formal consultation with soft lobbying? And also, I think it's a matter of fallacy. Are we talking about the same thing? In the beginning, you talk about phase 1, 2, 3 of the project. That's what you said at the Yuen Long District Council. So, Secretary, please tell us whether you're referring to the 3 phases of development as you mentioned at the District Council, or the information after phase 1 or 2, because you need to level with the public. Third point, recently another issue arose involving the consultant. I think it's premature to judge without full information. But it seems that there are so many problems here with the phase development approach, with the consultant, so on and so forth. At least I think there is a perception in the minds of the public that we have government business collusion here. The penalty is a ban of 3 months for tendering government projects. I wonder if there is a need to step up penalty. Well, there are so many questions.
When we consulted the Yuen Long District Council, we did focus on phase 1 development, but we've never said that we are giving up on phases 2 and 3. Going by the papers, well, we said categorically, is Wang Chau phase 1. If there are no phases 2 and 3, there is no phase 1 to talk about. On public hearing, we will deal with that later. Ms. Tanya Chan, followed by Mr. Lam Chuk Ting. I have a direct question on the consultant. Many colleagues talked about the barring for tendering for 3 months. Newspaper reports said that in the past 3 months, well, in relation to Town Planning Board applications, the restricted information has been provided. The government has said or has procedures on how to handle restricted information, and some consultants surprisingly used such restricted information to help gain profit for the clients, and they use such information for their applications with the town planning board. And once it was discovered, they just withdraw such information. And in the past 2 years, at least 3 consultants, including the present one, were involved. Does the government know about this? Are they turning a blind eye to it? What happened? How do you penalize them? 3 months only? That isn't good enough. So how are you going to increase your penalty? And also, is it they are stealing the information, or they are using it, or, well, the company, well, over $700 million were spent as consultancy fee for the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. This is not a new company. This is a well-established company. How is your penalty system work? How will you go about in your investigation? How can you prevent similar incidents from recurrence? Well, 3 months is not deterrent enough. Have you seriously looked into the matter? How come that you imposing or meeting out this 3 months penalty so soon? And how are you going to deal with other consultants who are doing the same thing? Mr. Eric Ma. Thank you, Member, for your question. We are dealing with the matter in all seriousness. In CEDD has looked into detailed into the consultancy agreements on Wang Chau. They have looked into the contracts with Arab, and they are investigating into whether the conditions have been breached. Now, Arab has not declared its interest with us, and this is very clear, and this is a clear breach of the contract, and we have meted out the penalty. So, under ESCSB's contracts, well, they are forbidden to bid for consultancy agreements under that mechanism for 3 months, and that will have a serious impact on them. And for other suspected cases, our colleagues are following up with the relevant departments, and it's not appropriate for me to comment at this stage. Madam Chair, which companies have been doing the same thing? What consequences are there? Mr. Ma, we don't have such information. After the meeting, we can provide you with the information. So please do that after the meeting. Have there been similar incidents, and what are the penalties for them? Do you have a sample of the contracts? There may be standard terms in the contracts. Please provide the same to members for our reference, because it has to do with professional ethics. Yes, Under Secretary, we can provide you with the standard terms in the contracts. These is very much public information. Mr. Lam Chuk Teng, followed by Mr. Wu Chi-wai. For this consultant Arab, which is suspected of leaking restricted information to business organizations for business activities, I query whether it is going against the official secrets regulations or laws. Are they accepting advantage from commercial organizations for their own benefits? And it is also going against the POBO, Prevention Against Bribery Ordinance. I ask that the government refer the cases to the law enforcement agencies. Pending the completion of such investigations, we should not allow Arab to put in tenders. We should not just impose a ban for 3 months. It is too light a penalty. I ask that the administration respond to my suggestions. Mr. Ma. on a penalty on error. Well, that is decided upon in accordance with the established procedures. 3 months is not a light penalty. For a company which has a staff of over 1,000, this is not a light penalty at all. Well, order, please, members. You have your chance to speak. We are doing this in accordance with the established practice. Criminal investigation, he hasn't responded. Would you be referring the case to the law enforcement agencies for criminal investigations? We are still following up on that. Professor Zhang, after the incident first came into light, Professor Zhang said that there was no records of the soft lobbying sessions. Professor Zhang, were you lying to the public? Because afterwards, media reports have carried reports of records of the soft lobbying exercises. And the deputy director did the soft lobbying. She must be reporting the results of the soft lobbying to her supervisors, the director, permanent secretary, etc. How come that the government doesn't have any recourse? Are you just are you doing it by just a verbal report? Are you lying to the public? Well, thank you, Mr. Lam, for giving me the chance to clarify. On that day, after I met with Mr. Eddie G and Mr. Edward Yu at the meeting, of course, I said we know exactly whom I met, but I'm not sure whether there are official records. And I said that these are informal meetings, soft lobbying or touch base in English. Do we have any official records? I said that I'm not sure. I have to check. So I did that afterwards. For frontline officers who liaised with district representatives, we don't have official minutes. Different colleagues have to report their meetings to their supervisors. And in our internal discussions, we also carry some information on such meetings as well. Mr. Lam referred to a particular newspaper, quoting certain papers. These are not meetings. That was just notes of some meetings of the government on the Wang Chau project. Well, at the people at the public gallery, please keep quiet and don't applaud or whatever. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, short question on the Undersecretary of Development for Arab using the government's information to serve other clients. Will the Undersecretary do criminal investigation if they are stealing restricted information of the government? This is clearly a criminal act. And also, Undersecretary for Development, you said that you have to go by the squatter policy in dealing with brownfield sites. And looking back at the squatter policy, we had to do a frozen survey so that we could confine the scale at that particular point. So would you be adopting the same approach? And that is, you would use a frozen survey, and when would that be done? And also, what kind of approaches would you adopt to make sure that abandoned farmland will not be turned into brownfield sites in the future? Undersecretary, anti-brownfield sites, as I explained earlier. Next year, yes, well, I just want to know your approach. Would you be doing a frozen survey? We would do a survey on the users and the distribution. It's not a frozen survey, but frozen survey carries with it its own legal implications. Well, if you don't do a frozen survey, then that's not a squatter policy at all. Well, we have to look at the uses and the distribution of brownfield sites. Well, that's ridiculous. Well, brownfield sites is not something new. How come that the government doesn't understand the situation of the brownfield sites? Well, please let him finish first. Well, I think he is trying to drag his feet here. Undersecretary, please continue. This is our proposed way forward. Next year, we would conduct a territory-wide brownfield site survey so that we know the uses and operation status of brownfield sites. Brownfield sites have been changing all the time in response to social needs. There are different economic uses and so on. Well, put it simply, you will not do a frozen survey, right? No, we would do a territory-wide survey on the uses and operation status. Well, when will frozen survey will be conducted, Undersecretary? When we do land resumption. Well, when we notify people that we would do land resumption, then we will conduct frozen survey. Well, the Undersecretary didn't know how frozen survey was done. Well, in 1982-83, that was a squatter frozen survey done. And I think you are misleading the public. What, for the there was a frozen survey done in 82 and 83, yes. Well, that was done on squatters, and that was done territory-wide. And we registered all squatters in Hong Kong, and we gave them a number individually, and we noted down the structure, the size, the materials of the squatters, and that was done in from 1982 to 84. But today we are talking about a different concept here. Well, sorry. Well, he said that he would adopt an approach similar to the squatter control policy. Undersecretary, would you do a frozen survey? No, we would not be doing the same kind of survey. It will be a different survey. We will consider Mr. Wu's suggestion, but what we are doing now is not a frozen survey. All right, Mr. Yu Si-wing, followed by Liao Yip-kong. The public is very concerned about how to resolve the housing problem in Hong Kong, and it is very much the government's responsibility. Well, there will be a total of 17,000 units, and you will do a study on phases 2 and 3, and that will take 2 years. And Wang Chau site involves squatters and brownfield sites. Do you think that you would complete the study in 2 years? Will you be able to come up with a proposal? And if that can't be done, how much longer will it take? First, that's my first question. Well, for phase 1, it is said that it will be completed by 2025. Now, when do you expect that phases 2 and 3 will be completed, Professor Zhang? Well, let me talk about phases 2 and 3 first. We would, on the one hand, conduct a consultancy study on how to take forward phases 2 and 3, and at the same time, the government is conducted a survey on brownfield sites. So these two will be done in parallel. The consultancy study will be completed in 2 years, and after that, we will map out the way forward and also the time needed for the works. And after that, we have to go through the statutory and consultation procedures as well. Phase 1, can I ask the HD colleagues? Well, for phase 1, the 4,000 units can be completed in 2024-25. It's some time off. And before the housing is constructed, we have to do infrastructure projects and roads, and we have to do site formation. That will take several years. And before that, we have to resume land resumption, infrastructure, site formation, and after all these have been done, then the housing authority will complete or construct the blocks in 3 to 4 years' time, and that means that will take us to 2025.
What about phase 2 and 3? If according to the consultancy's report, which will be ready in 2 to 3 years' time, when will the remaining flats be constructed? It's premature to set a timetable We'll look at the specific issues on infrastructure, environmental impact, mitigation measures, and handling of the views of the local community. We need to address all these issues before we come up with a specific timetable. Another question is this, about Phase 3 Wang Chau. The site covers an area of 3.2 hectares. So can you give priority to public housing development upon completion of Phase 2? It's true that the government land in Phase 3 covers 3.2 hectares. The total area, about 40% of the total area of Phase 3. But when we develop the relevant sites, we need to face the similar issues, environmental impact, traffic and transport, especially when the area involves brownfield operations. Decontamination is a big challenge for us. Mr. Lau Yip-Kang, followed by Mr. Eddie Ju. Well, in October, the government released its report on Wang Chau, totaling over 3,000 pages. The waiting time for a public housing unit, as we all know, is 4 to 5 years. If the development can be completed sooner, then more than 4,000 households will be benefited, and it is something good. And now the government is saying that they would conduct a brownfield study. I think that Hong Kong doesn't have comprehensive logistics policy, and I recalled that in Sich Tong's era, the government considered this aspect in relation to Lantau North. We need to address the brownfield issues, and in the report, the consultant acknowledges the benefits of brownfield operations. Brownfield sites are now used to accommodate obnoxious operations, scrap yards, storage facilities for used furniture, etc. I think that the general public also benefits from it. So what we need is a comprehensive policy to accommodate these operations. Mr. Paul Chair asked a question at the council meeting on Wednesday on brownfield operations, and Mr. Yao Seng-mo, Undersecretary, said that he was not in a position to answer. So, Secretary, can you tell us about the timetable and the involvement of different stakeholders, and also to take a macroscopic perspective, how you're going to handle the brownfield sites in Wang Chau? Madam Chair, we take a multi-pronged approach as far as land supply is concerned, and brownfield sites are one of our options. And we have NENT, Kutong North and Fanning North. There will be 50 hectares of land that will be brownfield sites which will be reprovisioned. And altogether, together with Yuen Long and Hong Shui Kiu, we have 300 hectares of brownfield sites, and we will take a holistic approach in developing the sites. Developing brownfield sites is our option in the long run, and we will not dodge from the challenges. Now, the problem with brownfield operations is that the operations are not in contravention of the land lease conditions. And as mentioned by Mr. Lau just now, some brownfield operations are closely linked to our daily lives, and they bring benefits to the general public. And the brownfield sites provide an important support for other industries in Hong Kong. So when we're talking about reprovisioning brownfield operations, we need to consider the geographical distribution, how they can be properly handled, and how we can come up with a comprehensive, large-scale policy to tie in with the new town development. We don't want the brownfield operations to just switch to other sites on our clearing effort. We'd like to have multi-story buildings to accommodate the brownfield operations so that we can maximize the use of land. Mr. Eddie, I want to remind the general public that Mr. Leung Chi-Chang, who just spoke in 2013, took part in rounds of soft lobbying. And I also find it peculiar. Mr. Lau Kang, you are chairman of the Heung Yi Kuk. And why are you only talking about brownfield operations? Don't you know that Pingshan Heung villages will be forced to leave their homes? It seems that you are turning a blind eye to these villages. And then you think that you should preserve and protect those scrap yards and operations controlled by Zheng Xuo. Now you say that brownfield sites are very important. Soft lobbying. This issue is important because Zheng Xuo, the protagonist of the soft lobbying incident, has a direct conflict of interest. He's in charge of the brownfield operations there. And after soft lobbying, the government then made such a substantial change of the policy. And that's the problem with Wang Chau development. Because after soft lobbying, the government changed its stance, whereas the disadvantaged villages did not have a say. After you decided to go ahead with phase 1 first, you then conducted the so-called consultation. But by then, the villages had no alternatives. Now, 2 months ago, Secretary, I already urged you to meet with the villages in Wang Chau. When are you going to do that? Second question, for Undersecretary, Mr. Ma. I understand that before you assumed the post as Undersecretary for Development, you worked in AECOM. You were the Vice President of Civil Engineering and Infrastructure. So in your experience, appropriating government information to assist in planning applications of a private developer, is it a common phenomenon? For 2 questions. Would staff in the public gallery please uphold the order up there? Well, meeting with any member of the public is not a problem for me. The problem is, what is the purpose of the meeting? But it's such a major scandal. You're talking about the purpose of the meeting? Would you please let me finish? I asked you for a yes and no answer, and you're just digressing. Mr. Eddie, please let him finish first. Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have to answer the question in my own way. Well, please allow the Secretary to give a complete answer first. We need to, put it in the minutes. Would you please allow me to answer your question? I asked about the purpose of the meeting because, first of all, the statutory procedures have begun and we have completed the procedures partially. Well, if villagers want to inquire about land resumption or acquisition, we have a government department in charge of that, and this is the established procedure. All right. Sorry, Madam Chair, I just want him to... Well, but your time is up. You can ask other colleagues to ask the questions on your behalf. We need to observe order here. Next, Mr. Siu Kao-chun. Thank you. Just now, Secretary, said that in English, in fact, soft lobbying means touch base. So I immediately looked it up in the collocation dictionary. So touching base means getting in touch or liaising or contacting the other side. So I don't know whether by soft lobbying the government actually means getting in touch with them. Now, about this Arab incident, I want to know whether you had touched base with the consultant, because now you impose a ban of 3 months and they refrain from tendering for government projects. But I think that this is a non-penalty, because it is slightly more, it's just a slightly long vacation for them. This is totally not in line with the public's expectation on what a penalty means. And you still need to explain to us about the Arab incident. When were they awarded the contract? When did they become the consultant in Wang Chau development? How many other bids were received? I think we have a lot of questions. You need to give us more background information. I have a yes or no question. Is it true that, Secretary, on 7 occasions you had failed to meet with the villagers? Any so-called touch base after the incident, Mr. Ma? Well, we followed the established procedure. For contravention of contract clauses, we take a very serious stance and we follow the established procedure. So any soft lobbying or any did you touch base with the consultant before imposing the 3-month ban? We asked about the contraventions. We had correspondence. We communicated with the consultant. We inquired about the issues rising, and also we followed up on the issues. So information about when they became the consultant, we can provide this information after the meeting. All right, Secretary, according to the information I received from my colleagues, I am not aware of the so-called 7 occasions on which I had failed to meet the villagers. All right, next, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Madam Chair. Now, as far as the Wang Chau development is concerned, there have been criticisms that it is a collusion between the government, business, rural and tribe forces. And we have a spate of incidents, the most recent one being this consultant Arab. It is alleged that they had leaked information or even stolen information from government report. And now, according to the established penalty system, they were banned from bidding for government projects. And in fact, many members here are astonished for a large company to face such a so-called major penalty. Well, this is impossible. Only a ban of 3 months. I want to ask the government about this established penalty system, on how a contravening firm is to be penalized. And about following up on the issue, would you take the civil or criminal route? Because if it's a kind of a misappropriation, are you going to conduct a criminal investigation to pursue liability? Third point.
We are concerned as to whether the Wang Chau development project is a reasonable project. Now, the restricted information has been divulged, and Professor Zheng said that the consultant is helping you with the consultancy study. And if this is the case, would such leakage of information affect whether this is an appropriate or reasonable project or not? Because we are criticizing that this is not a reasonable project because it's a project which is taken forward with a collusion behind. So we don't know yet whether there is further information that has been leaked. Should we be reviewing the entire development project as a result? Mr. Ma first. On the contract. In my response to Ms. Tanya Chan, I said that we would provide further information to you on the terms in the contract so that members can know exactly what the terms are. What about the penalty mechanism? Yes, we do have a handbook, which is about the EACSB handbook, and we would provide the same to you. We are still following up on the case, and we don't find any criminal element in the incident. We will follow up in accordance with the contractual terms. Professor Zhang, you're concerned about the contract of the CEDD, but that is not a contract on the P&E study. So we are talking about two different contracts here. And as you said, this consultant is working on a number of contracts. And the government stance is that we will not be following all the recommendations made by the consultant. We will make our own decision and make our own judgment. Mr. Edward Yeo, Madam Chair, there are three important questions. First, about the financial assessment in the consultant. In paragraph 4.3.2, you can see that it mentions about compensation for land resumption. Zone C, and the word used, however, and then the last 5 lines have totally been blackened or blocked out. So for these 5 lines, are they related to the compensation rate? I think it is. And also, can you provide the information to us again? Well, for the other blackened parts, well, they have to do with the names, organizations. Can you make available the information in these 5 lines to us? Well, can I finish with the 2 other questions first? I would like to thank the Director of Land for providing the illegal occupation of government land yesterday. The yellow and red parts have to do with, say, some STT sites. I suggest that my team can go work together with the government to do some new planning. Around 1 hectare of plot, which has been granted as TT, is right next to the road. We can immediately build a multi-story compound to house the brownfield operations there. And then we can immediately take forward phases 2 and 3 in phases. And it's technically feasible. And we can also use the illegally occupied government land, and we can resolve the issue of reprovisioning for brownfield operations. So can I have a response from the government on that? Would you consider it? And also in terms of timetable, the Secretary said that at the end of 2013, it was decided that phase 1 should be taken forward first. And how come that the consultant report is completed only at end of 2014? Is it the case that you have disregarded the consultant's report? So, yes, please. Can I go first? Concerning the planning and engineering feasibility study, well, only a small part of the information, including financial information, land matters, we have taken reference from the legal advice, and we said that we should not make public such information. And starting July 2012, the consultant in accordance with established practice, provide some initial analysis assessment to the government. So that's why at the end of 2013, based on the information available on hand at that time, we knew that there were different infrastructure projects, mitigation measures that had to be involved in taking forward phases 2 and 3. So that was the decision at that time. We have blackened out that particular paragraph, as what the Secretary said. Based on the principles he highlighted, we have blackened out certain parts. And these parts have to do with land matters. So because we have blackened that out, I cannot give you the details of that part. You may have the misconception that if we resume land, we would negotiate with the land owners. That's not the case. When we do land resumption, we would abide by the established mechanism approved by the Finance Committee, and we designate the sites into 4 zones, and the rates will be updated on a half-yearly basis. Mr. Chen Chengtai, I have questions. In relation to Arab, which is appropriating information from the government, have you consulted the DOJ to initiate criminal prosecution? Would you consider that? Mr. Ma, have you consulted the DOJ? Up to today, we couldn't identify any criminal element involved in the case. While they are appropriating information from the government and hand it over to the third party, isn't it a criminal case already? The administration, maybe next time. Can you provide a copy of the contract between the government and the consultant? Yes. As I said just now, we will provide you with the contractual terms related to the case. Would you consider seeking legal advice from the DOJ and then initiate criminal prosecution? If we suspect, if we have the suspicion, then we would do it. Now, up to now, there is no criminal element identified in the case. Or they are appropriating information from you. Okay, let me turn to another question. The consultant handed over the information to New World Development, and New World Development made use of such confidential information in its application for rezoning. Well, is there any way that the government can dispel the perception that there is business-government collusion? Well, we would go by the contractual terms to follow up. Well, there is no point in holding this meeting if you are not doing all these follow-up work. Well, let's have the meeting after you have given us a contract. Well, we will provide the relevant information after the meeting. Well, Dr. Zhang, you'll have the same answer no matter how many times you ask. There is no point in holding the meeting then, because we don't have the contract with us today. So what's your question? Well, is the government, being governed by New World Development or what? Is this a question? Yes, this is a question. Professor Zhang, the government puts priority to public interest, and the government is very much the public authority in dealing with such incidents. Now, you have the contractual terms, right? Can you briefly tell us the contractual terms in relation to leakage of information? Can you read out the contractual terms to us now? Yeah, we don't have the information on hand, and we will provide the same to you after the meeting. Well, you are here for the meeting, but you don't have the information. How can that be? Well, the problem lies with you, the Secretary. You said you don't have the information. From September to now, on this Wang Chau saga, I think the government is adopting is giving out information in drips and drabs. And Professor Zhang, have you considered suspending the project and restart the consultation process? Professor Zhang, we have adopted a transparent approach. We have done open consultation. Yes, Dr. Zheng, he said that he will give you the information later on. You've got only 10 seconds left. He can't give you the answer. You're just wasting your own time, Dr. Zheng. Well, Professor Zhang, would you suspend the Wang Chau development project? No, I would not suspend the project. Well, I'd like to remind those in the public gallery, please keep quiet, or else I'll have to execute the rules of procedures. Mr. Roy Kwong, followed by Mr. Raymond Chen. How come that you don't have you haven't brought along the information to you for the meeting? Well, our time is precious. Well, I think the Arab incident is outrageous. Now, it's like the scenario of a thief stealing information, and you are prohibiting him from stealing for 3 months. This is no penalty at all. I think this problem may be just at the tip of the iceberg, and it's just time we happen to identify the problem, and we found that the site next to the development project site is being developed by the a property developer employing the same consultants. So shouldn't the government be responsible for answering the question, and that is, would you consider seeking legal advice from the DOJ? The administration said that only when there were suspicions that they would seek the legal advice from DOJ. Now, I am telling you now that there are really indeed suspicions. Would you consider seeking the advice from DOJ? And Undersecretary, we would be following up in accordance with the established mechanism. Why 3 months, not 6 months or 1 year? How did you arrive at 3 months? I will not comment on the individual case. Is there a specific clause stating that such will be the penalty when there is a breach, or you just make it up yourself, or what? Well, we are going by the established mechanism. Do you have anything written in black and white in relation to the penalties? Mr. Ma, do you have any written information on penalties? Well, penalties are meted out based on individual circumstances, and we will not comment on individual case. Well, we are focusing on this individual case of Wang Chau, and how come that he gave us such a reply? Who decided on the penalty? Why is it 3 months and not 6 months or 1 year? Is it too light? Well, the analogy that I gave was that a thief, well, you were barring him from stealing again in the future 3 months. So how can that be? We do have the Engineering and Associated Consultant Selection Board, and the penalty was decided upon by the board, and it thinks the penalty is appropriate. When was the decision made? And under what circumstances was it made? Well, were they just handing down this penalty based on this specific case, or was it a mechanism drawn up a long time ago for, say, a breach of contractual terms? I think this point is very important. If similar incidents happen in the future, would you be meting out the same penalty in the future? Well, the board made the decision. For this individual case, 3 months was considered too light a penalty by the public. Well, that was a decision made by the board. Okay, I have a second question. Madam Chair, would we be holding a public hearing on this so that more people could be allowed to speak on the matter? Yes, you've arrived late, and a member raised the same issue. I said that we would deal with that later on, towards the end of the meeting. Now, many people were affected by the incident, including those in the public gallery. They might not speak up. Has the administration been liaising with them? How's the consultation work like? Secretary. Under the statutory procedures, we are doing what needs to be done. And if it involves land resumption in the future, we'll go by the established practice. Mr. Raymond Chen. People's Power, Mr. Albert Chan, our former member, said many times that the government should not easily believe into what the consultant said.
Now, I want the government to retrieve the relevant minutes. What was your reply when Mr. Albert Chan asked you not to easily trust the consultants? Well, today the Arab company failed to observe the contract clause and appropriated government or information in the government report for the private developers' work. At least you should consider whether any such incident happened before. This morning, Mr. Ma, Undersecretary, said that you don't have any information at hand. I believe that you do have information. You just didn't bring the information along. I want to know your action after the occurrence of the incident. You said that it would be handled according to the contract clauses and nothing else. So what does it mean if you have the so-called penalty after the breach of contract, and then it's in accordance with the contract clauses which were set by the committee that you mentioned, and then you don't have information at hand to decide whether this is a heavy penalty or not, and then you said that you have no comment on this case. So you can be excused now because the Development Bureau is responsible for responding to this incident, and you just kept repeating your answer. That is, you would act in accordance with the contract clauses, under the established mechanism. We want to know whether it's just a temporary ban of 3 months. Will there be any further penalty? If you say that this is already a very heavy penalty, this is the final penalty, it's outrageous. If you can't even say whether this is a light penalty or a harsh penalty, because you're not being accountable to the public. Of course, we are unable to read the full consultancy's report, and then you're unable to answer our questions. Don't say that we're abusing the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance. We're asking very simple questions in this meeting, and you're unable to answer the questions. So should we just propose to adjourn the meeting so that the Development Bureau can go back and retrieve all the information, clauses of the contract, composition of the EACSB, before you come back and explain to us the Arab incident? Madam Chair, just make them answer. Is it that they cannot answer anything else apart from what they've said? Is it the case that they're unable to give us any further information in their reply? Because in that case, well, we can just ask them to leave. Mr. Ma, anything to supplement? Nothing to supplement. Mr. Chan, do you have anything to add? You have 30 seconds. So how about another joint meeting of the Housing Panel and Development Panel, so that they can come back with more information? Because if you can only give us written information on paper, let's be pen pals. We don't need to have meetings. Is this a formal request? If it's a formal request for a joint meeting, then formally make this request, and then we can discuss your request later. Mr. Nathan Law, followed by Mr. Tommy Zhang. Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout the meeting, we've heard the government beating about the bush. So I ask a simple question. I want a simple answer about the Arab incident, appropriating confidential government information. I want to know when the 3-month ban begins. It will start. It started on the 7th of November. 2016. I think this is absurd because, according to information, in August 2015, Arab assisted New World Development in submitting the planning application, and then the CEDD, in responding to the application, said that Arab, on 2 occasions, assisted in the consultancy study and asked Arab to clarify. The developer or Arab should clarify the sources of information obtained.
General public. 之後奧雅納再提交嘅更新。
And then in the updated version, all the confidential information was removed. So in September 2015, when Arab assisted New World Development to submit an application which contained sensitive government information, and when there was a request for Arab to clarify the situation, was there any clarification? In September 2015, the CDD found that in this private planning application, some restricted information might have been included in relation to the Wang Chau development. The department immediately followed up on the issue. There was follow-up action. I'm asking for a response. I want to know whether they gave any response. I know that you're being responsible. There were correspondence. So among the correspondence was did the other party revealed how the sensitive information would be dealt with? I think it's not appropriate for me to disclose the details here since it involves commercially sensitive information. If you say that this is a commercial secret, I don't think we need to have a meeting here. Any correspondence with Arab and any details of communication between you and Arab on any project should be revealed. Otherwise, we don't need to have a meeting here, because we are looking into whether any conflict of interest or government business collusion is involved, whether the consultant is misappropriating the sensitive information from the government to assist in a private developer, because New World Development is benefited, whereas the underprivileged, the disadvantaged villages who suffer from the incident cannot get the information. And then between September 2015 and November 2016, we asked about the correspondence between you and Arab, and then you talked about the commercial secrets. So that means we don't need to have a meeting here. As a matter of established practice, you just allow the consultant to misappropriate government information. Mr. Tommy Zhang, I have two simple questions. Secretary, you talk about brownfield sites, and they may affect the subsequent development of Wang Chau. So what is the government's position? Because you say that a comprehensive brownfield policy is underway, and we do have industries relying on the existing brownfield operations, and if provisioned, these operations would become very costly. I understand other concerns: long waiting time for public housing, existing residents being very reluctant to be decanted. So I'd just like to know your position on brownfield operations. Who would take the question? Professor Zhang. For Phase 2 and 3 of Wang Chau development, indeed, a large area of brownfield operations is involved, covering logistics, recycling, and vehicle repair industries. So we need to have a comprehensive policy to properly handle these industries, and we also need to assess the impact on these industries. In deciding the way forward for Phase 2 and 3 development, we also need to consider other factors apart from brownfield operations, including infrastructural support and environmental impact. On brownfield policy, I'll defer to Mr. Ma. Thank you. We understand that brownfield operations provide support to a diversity of industries. At the same time, we need to consider the fact that land resources are scarce in Hong Kong. We have competing demands in terms of housing and other operations. We need to maximize the use of land resources. So from this perspective, we'd like to conduct a study expeditiously to see if brownfield operations can be accommodated in multi-story buildings using advanced technology so that they can continue to provide support to the industries. We understand that this is no easy task. We have commenced a study. We hope that in future operation it will be able to meet the needs. We also understand that for some industries there will be a difficulty in reprovisioning into multi-story buildings. For example, industries with the use of large machinery. So we will look carefully into the proposal. Mr. Zhang, I hope that this can be put on record that when considering reprovision of brownfield operations, the government would also consider, the business aspect. That is, for example, the rent. Well, I only have little time left, so just a comment, perhaps. Now, let's talk about the public's perception of the incident, or from the business sector's perspective. I think you're letting the consultant off very lightly. It's not so much a heavy penalty. Sorry, your time is up, Mr. Zhang. You should consider pursuing civil or even criminal liability. Ms. Eunice Yong. According to a report, about 400 villages would have to be decanted by 2018 latest, and for those affected residents, they could get an ex gratia payment or be allocated a public housing unit. Can you disclose the number of households involved and how much is reserved for decanting or for compensation? And can you tell us the more about the compensation mechanism? I think this will be the concern of many villages. If they're unwilling to be decanted, how will the government handle the situation? Second question, in February 2016, according to the information that you released, you received a complaint about the illegal occupation of 3.8 hectares of land. And according to the media, 1.2 hectares of land was ultimately permitted to be leased to these occupiers on a short-term basis. Can you explain why you allow short-term tenancies instead of open tender? Of course, you've already explained because of site constraints and location, it's difficult to put the sites up for tender. But I think regardless of these factors, you could still have put them up for tender. I'll defer to the Permanent Secretary to talk about compensation. In replying to questions from previous members, we mentioned that for the affected residents, we have an established mechanism for compensation and decanting. The question carried 2 points. One on the amount of compensation. I think the Lands Department will get in touch with the villages to get more details to see how their needs can be met and what amount of ex gratia payment would be available.
With regard to rehousing, the established mechanism is that when they meet with the eligibility criteria for public housing, then they will be given a public housing unit. They don't have to wait. But then still, they have to meet with the asset and income limit. So that's how it's about. We haven't started work on that front yet, and the Land Department will be liaising soon with the residents on that. Second question, or I'll defer to Ms. Chen. Or Mr. Chen, rather. There is suspected illegal occupation of land. After the Land Department has received complaint in February, we have done law enforcement, and 3.8 hectares of land have been found to be illegally occupied. And after the law enforcement action, most of the illegal occupation has been ratified, and for 2 sites. And the landowners have removed the illegal structure after the deadline. We have initiated prosecutions, and we have successfully prosecuted 1 case. And on the 5th of October, the person has been fined $90,000. On the other case, the Land Department has finished collecting evidence, and we have initiated prosecution against the person, and the case is now in the court. And with regard to the remaining 1.2 hectares of government land, the Land Department has received a number of SDT applications. And these sites are private land sites, and because of the topography, they cannot be tendered. So some members have indicated their wish to speak for a second round, but we're supposed to end at 10:30 because there is another meeting following that. And including myself, there are 9 members who would like to speak for the first time, so perhaps we'll have to extend the meeting time a bit. And also I have to deal with the question of whether we would hold a public hearing. And if we really do that, then members can speak again at that public hearing. So I will not give a second round to members. So after we're finished with the first round, then we will deal with the issue of whether we will hold a public hearing. Mr. Edward Lau, followed by Mr. Lam Kwok Hong. Thank you. Madam Chair, I want to make 3 points. The first one is relation to the consultant using restricted information from the government. I think the penalty is too light. To my understanding, Arab has started dismissing people. Around 30 people have been dismissed, and some of them have been redeployed. With the government follow-up on the matter expeditiously so that some information will not get lost in the future. You said that you would not, you don't have the contract with you today. Please provide the same to us immediately after the meeting. And also, do you have any guidelines on the use of such information? And what are the preventive measures you would put in place? Whether it's Hong Shui-Q or Wang Chau, I said all the same. There may be a mechanism for ex gratia payment. But then the payment level is lagging behind the times. Well, either you pay $600,000 or you give them a public housing unit, but then they still have to go through the income assessment or test. Now, for those who can't be rehoused in public housing, they have to live in subdivided units and pay high rents. So can the THB review your resumption policy so that the affected residents can be rehoused in public housing? All of them can be rehoused. Madam Chair, with regard to the compensation and land resumption, it's under the portfolio of the Development Bureau. Can I ask Mr. Chen to respond? On land clearance and rehousing for occupiers of land, the government has established policies and procedures to deal with that. As what Mr. Lau said, for those who meet with the eligibility criteria for public housing, we will house them in public housing. But public housing resources are very limited, of course, so we have to make the best use of such resources. Is the mic working or not? Sorry, the speaker's not coming through. Sorry, the speaker's not coming through. well, the rehousing policy comes under the THB because it has to do with public housing. So I will not follow up further on that. Well, we talked about squatters. There is an established mechanism for rehousing, but for brownfield sites, this is another important issue. Maybe there are two car parks in the site. Now, if the 2 brownfield sites for the 2 car parks are resumed, then the cars will go around in the area, and that will create a nuisance. So there are so many car parks in Wang Chau. How are you going to deal with that? And also the secretary mentioned about using multi-story buildings to reprovision for brownfield operations. Some brownfield operations have to be operated on the ground, and they cannot operate on upper floors. Maybe I can take you to a site visit if you're interested. I hope that the policy can be drawn up as soon as possible. Well, there is a shortage of both industrial and housing land. So when will a policy be drawn up? On brownfield sites, as you understand, and as what Mr. Lau said, if we are to clear, say, a car park, say, for example, the parking spaces will be cancelled, and the cars will find some place to park, right? So there may be illegal parking problem as a result. So we have to deal with that seriously. Mr. Leung, before Mr. Leung speaks, I will extend the meeting time for 50 minutes to allow everyone to ask, at least for the first round. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Madam Chair, Mr. Eric Ma, I have a question for you. You used to work in a prestigious civil engineering group. You were the deputy executive director. And you know well that if you want to meet a client, you have to bring along certain information, right? When you attended meetings for business deals, would you tell the clients that you didn't bring along with you the relevant information? If you are, say, are you now a deputy executive director or a undersecretary now? You can be here without bringing in any information with you. Please ask your colleagues to bring down the information. They are just next door. How can you refuse to do that? Are you refusing to provide the information, or are you not have you not brought the information with you? Mr. Ma, I really don't have the information or the documents on hand. So can you? But then in your reply to Mr. Nathan Law, you said that there is commercial information which should be confidential and cannot be made available to us. Mr. Long was asking, well, let me tell you, I have jotted your point down. You said that you refer to the letters or correspondences with the company. You said that this should not be made available to us because it has to do with business secrets. So what kind of business secrets are you talking about? You said that, well, you shouldn't be making available such information. Have you asked Mr. Paul Chen on that? In other words, after the incident was exposed or came to light, and we asked you how could that happen, and you said that you couldn't provide the relevant information. Well, can you be very clear whether you declined to provide the information or you haven't brought the information? Now, Ms. Tanya Chen and the members said that the information, including the contracts and also the penalty clauses and so on, should be made available to us. And correspondences, as referred to by Mr. Nathan Law. Well, let me finish first, Mr. Leung. Can you tell us? You will provide information to us after the meeting. Well, tell us exactly what documents you will provide, what documents you would not provide. Now, after the meeting. Mr. Leung, well, Mr. Leung, please return to your seat. Mr. Leung, please return to your seat. Wow, you can't do that. Mr. Leung? Mr. Leung, please return to your seat. You can't act like that. Well, this is not a meeting with PMP invoked. Mr. Long, well, please return the document to him. Mr. Long? Mr. Long, I warn you now. If you don't return your seat, I have to execute the rules of procedures. Please hand back the document to him. Mr. Long, Mr. Zhu, return the document to him. Mr. Long, please leave the meeting room. Mr. Long, please leave the meeting room. Well, let's suspend the meeting. Meeting suspended.